So, welcome to another Smart Digital Workshop where we stay motivated and rise together by engaging in real conversations that enhance your personal and professional brand. My name is Dr. Theo Fowles, and I'm joined by my co facilitator, Dr. Jackie Thomas. In this episode, we will discuss K-12 and those that work in the field, making things happen with our young ones, our middle school young ones, our high school young ones, and how we teach teachers to be great at what they do. Our guests today are Dr. Kimi Mustafa and Dr. Tatua Ntoya. And at this time, I'll allow Dr. Kimi to introduce herself and to tell us a little bit more about what she does.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Dr. Kimi Mustafa. I've been an educator and advocate for children for a little over 10 years now. I have experience with pre-K to 12. Most of my experiences within early childhood. I was a teacher for 10 years before transitioning to be an assistant principal of instruction this year at a middle school.
And Dr. Ntoya, please tell us a little bit about yourself as well.
Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Tatua Ntoya. I've been in K-12 since 2001. I was a science teacher in the classroom. I taught biology, physics, environmental science, and I took the transition to a leadership position. I was dean of students, and I transitioned from there to do some consulting work. Now I work with schools around STEAM and STEM integration, and also working with schools around diversity issues and getting our students of color engaged in school. Great to be here. Thank you so much for having us, Theo and Jackie.
You are welcome, and thanks for being here. Now I'm going to go ahead and dive in and ask the first question, and this will be for you, Dr. Mustafa. Please describe your pathway to the role that you currently have. What would you say is the typical route to your field and to your position?
So I would say that right now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm an assistant principal of instruction. The typical route to being an assistant principal is teacher, usually some other sort of out of the classroom position, whether it's dean, teacher on special assignment, or like dean of academics, something like that. So some sort of out of the classroom teacher leader position. And then after some years there, then into assistant principal and then principal or wherever you choose to go from there. My route is not so typical. I would say that mine is kind of in between. So I had a lot of years of teaching experience, then I had some teacher leader experience. So I was still teaching full time, but then also being coordinator of literacy and some other positions while teaching, and then went into assistant principal of instruction. So I'm an assistant principal that focuses on everything, but primarily coaching teachers to be better at instruction.
And Dr. Ntoya, same question.
So my route was a little not very typical, and I'm going to piggyback off of what Dr. Mustafa said, that the role I did the typical classroom teacher, and I think anyone who wants to go into administration, it's really important that you kind of get your groove as being a classroom teacher, and then as you're a classroom teacher, you move up to the instructional role, and then that's how you transition into that leadership position. So I was in administration, dean of students, like I said. Then I got laid off, and the same time I got laid off was the same time I got into my doctoral program. It was like 2 weeks apart. And so I was in a doctoral program trying to figure out what to do with my life, and I got a consulting gig, and we were just going around schools and basically coaching other teachers. And so I took the leap of faith last year to just go at it myself and start consulting on my own. So that's what I've been doing for this is my second year now.
Awesome. And I'd like to stay with you, Dr. Ntoya. What are some other pathways at your level of expertise? So what are some other options that you could take advantage of? And then also someone with your expertise, what are some things you could do beyond your level if you were looking to move forward or up in your career?
That's an interesting question because there's the way I look at it now, being, having a doctoral degree and being a doctor, there's so many things out there for you. For instance, I can go into teaching and teach at the higher ed level. I can continue teaching at the K-12 level. I can do some consulting work, and that's what I'm really interested in because there's so many things that need to happen at the K-12 level. And I was just talking to a good friend of mine, and we were just talking about how there are things that need to happen at the K-12 level, but the schools don't have the bandwidth to make it happen. It's, there's the day-to-day things you have to worry about. There's, things on the pure bureaucratic level you have to worry about. And when it comes to things like just finding a grant that can help the school, like who has the bandwidth to do that? And working with teachers now outside the classroom, for me, getting them to like create their own curriculum, like who has the time to do that? Because I was sitting with a teacher and we were kind of going back and forth on what she wanted to teach. And I was like, you know what, let me write this up for you. And as I was doing it, I was like, wow, when do teachers have time to do this? In between grading, in between setting up the curriculum, in between self-care, like there really isn't a lot of time to make this happen. So it's, we talk a lot about teachers being able to do this on their own, but if they don't get the time to do it, it doesn't happen. So there's a lot of space in there. And if you know where your space is, where your niche is, I think there could be some good things happening out of the box in the classrooms.
Thank you. And Dr. Mustafa, same question.
I would say that some pathways at my current level of expertise are kind of wide within education. Having a doctorate degree in education or in educational leadership means that I could be, like Dr. Ntoya said, teaching at the higher education level. It also means that I can continue to be at a school level as a principal or administrator. Another thing, I can do some consulting work. I can also do some curriculum development, considering that I have like my degrees in teaching and then also child experience within child development and things like that. And then there's also opportunities to just work within curriculum development companies, things like that. And then coaching, sub work, etc. There are a lot of opportunities within there. It's just about finding, I guess, what you're passionate about and then moving from there. So I would say there are a lot of pathways.
Thank you. So we're going to stay with you, Dr. Mustafa. Tell us what your doctoral research was on and what you found.
So my doctoral research was on the experience of African American elementary school students and their experience with culturally relevant pedagogy. I did this within a school in South LA where teachers and staff members were taught what culturally relevant pedagogy was, how it can look in the classroom, how they can go about making changes or adaptations in their classroom so that children of color were successful. What I found was that even though there was so much training and resources available, a lot of people are still really unclear as to what culturally relevant pedagogy is and how it can look in the classroom. So a lot of times it's, well, I have the books and the books have pictures in them that look like the kids, or the books are about kids from LA, or they have Black or brown children in it, and that's as far as it goes. Or, I do call and response and that's it. So it's very base level. So it's like entry level to, yeah, this is culturally relevant pedagogy, but it's not necessarily getting to know the kids in your classroom, like what is actually important, what's impacting them, and how can I bring that into my teaching? How can I bring that into the experiences I bring them? How can I empower the students and families that I'm serving? So I found that it was a lot missing, which is why we didn't get to the deeper level of how can I make this be living inside our classroom in school.
Wow, thank you. And Dr. Ntoya, same question.
So my research was around STEM integration. And it was really looking at ways that we can integrate STEM in a meaningful way. And if you think about STEM education, you talk to a lot of educators. STEM education is maybe just like the S, science, or we have a robotics program, the T, or maybe we do some really intensive math work. But the idea of STEM integration is just how do you integrate all of those pieces together, and what would that look like, and what is the most efficient and effective way to do that? So what I found was if you were to take like two processes, so engineering design, what engineers do, and scientific inquiry, what scientists do, and kind of combine the two because they're very similar. If you can do those two things, you can integrate STEM in any content area. So you can integrate STEM in English, you can integrate STEM in history, you can do it in math, you can do it in science, and really get students involved in these things that engineers and scientists do. So just looking at what, and maybe a little bit of what Dr. Mustafa said as well, that a lot of schools aren't doing that integrated work, even though they say they're a STEAM school or they have a STEAM program, that they're not really integrating STEAM. And a lot of teachers are like, well, I'm not a science person, I'm not a math person, I'm not a technology person. Like, do I need to go out and learn all of those different disciplines? And the answer is no. If you just take these processes, allow kids to do these processes. And in my research, it says if you combine any two of the four, then you're doing STEAM. So I focused on the two processes and found out that could be a very effective way to integrate STEM on a lot of fronts. From the student front, that they can see that this is the process that it takes to really go in depth with STEAM. And then on the teacher front, when you're setting up your courses, you're setting up your curriculum, you can really do it in a very straightforward way that doesn't where you don't have to go out and learn all these different things. You can do it by just using these two processes. And the main research was around using using STEAM integration to teach physical science.
That's great. And we often have folks that are watching or tuning in at a later date. So if you could just tell us briefly what STEAM stands for. I know a lot of people heard of STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, math. But if you could define STEAM for us, that'd be great.
So in K-12, we love our acronyms. We have acronyms for everything. So the A is actually the arts. And the interesting thing about the arts is when we think about STEAM, we don't realize that engineering and science really went hand in hand with the arts. Like there was scientists who used the arts to represent the science, right? You think of the Manchurian Man, the guy with all the arms and the legs, right? That was a very scientific piece. So even if you take an art class and you're learning about the design principles, shade, texture, right? All that stuff really allows you to bring in these science principles. So, arts and STEAM really go hand in hand and just allows you to have a better representation of what you're learning, but then also have you think about things in different ways and how to represent things in different ways and really take that artistic view that a lot of students have and integrate it into the work that you're doing.
Perfect. Dr. Mustafa, you have our next question, which is what professional organizations would you suggest to be a part of within this field of teaching and why?
There are a number of ones. I would just say to think about what you are particularly interested in. So Council for Exceptional Children was one that I was initially a part of. And this organization is shares information about students that have special needs, disabilities, special giftedness, etc. And this is just to learn more about how you can best support the students in your classroom. So I really enjoyed being a part of that. The National Association for Early Childhood and the Young Child, and I know that I'm saying that all wrong, but NAEYC was another one that I initially was a part of. And that one was really helpful. It has a lot of different conferences that they offer as well as resources to make sure that you know what the latest is in terms of making sure you meet the needs and know the standards of the students that you're teaching. So when I was teaching preschool, this was really helpful for me. Currently, I would say the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, which is ASCD, is a good one, and that's for educational leaders. And it just they have a lot of different things that they produce in terms of books, conferences, things like that, to just bring to the forefront what things you may be experiencing within your career. So retaining teachers, making sure that you're a good leader if you're a principal, how to integrate things like STEM or STEAM or social emotional learning, things that our children should be exposed to, just making that really applicable. They have writing from different people that contribute, etc. On the research end, the American Education Research Association is a good one for education. They also have current topics as well as conferences and things like that that just bring up things that are relevant within education and that are helpful. It's something that some colleagues of mine have contributed to in terms of with their dissertation work or other relevant topics that affect the field today.
Perfect. And Dr. Ntoya, I know that you're stepping out into the consulting world as well. So if you have a mix of professional organizations for teachers, but also things that you've come across in consulting as well, that'd be interesting to know.
Yeah, I've been involved in, well, first of all, I would say all of you guys watching this and everyone on this panel, I would really push you guys to get on Twitter. Theo, you were kind of the trendsetter in our doctoral program. You were on Twitter and you were doing Twitter chats. We're like, what is this Twitter thing? But there is so much professional development that happens out there in Twitter. There's so many different educators who are doing amazing out of the box things on Twitter. So I would really push folks to just get on Twitter. And my best professional development thus far, hands down, I found it on Twitter. And there's this little app called Voxer. And there are so many educators that I'm connected to through Voxer. And that's another very wealth of resource there. And I am a part of this organization called EduMatch, EduMatch, which was founded by Dr. Sarah Thomas. And there's so many educators doing a lot of amazing things. And like I keep saying, it's been the best. It's really taken my thinking to a new level. It's taken my practice to a new level, and it's taken my connectedness with other educators to a new level. And being a consultant, I'm able to make really impactful connections through EduMatch and through Twitter and through Voxer. And it's just allowed me to build my own professional learning network and use the network in a lot of different ways and contribute in a lot of very effective ways, because there's so much happening out there in this space, in this ed tech space. And we need our educators of color to not only participate, but be at the forefront of what this looks like at our schools.
Awesome. I think that's a good transition. We'll stick with you, Dr. Ntoya, about what advice would you give yourself if you're entering the field of teaching today?
First advice I would give myself is get connected. And I remember I was a first, second, third year educator, and I was going through some difficult times, and I really didn't feel like I had anyone to talk to. I haven't built my network up. I didn't know quite what I was doing. I didn't know what my next steps were. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what my trajectory was. And I feel like had I been connected and had I been able to really have that strong network around me, that I would have been able to have a shoulder to lean on when I was going through the tough times, and people to understand what I'm going through because they were going through some of the same things. And, just some type of mentorship and just different points of view to help me along the way. So I wish I would have been connected earlier, and I wish I would have gone through the work of building my own professional network earlier and what that would look like. And I've always been good at kind of meeting people and networking, but not doing it strategically.
Awesome. Dr. Mustafa, take us back to the very beginning. What would you tell yourself?
If I were entering this field today, I would use the phrase that is always used, which is do your research. Like, actually find out what you are getting into. I went into the field of education going, oh my goodness, I love children and I want to change the world. And I still do. I still do, but knowing the ins and outs of education is really important. Like, it would have been nice for me to know a little bit about how educate policy within education works, the setups within the school. So like what red tape exists, what and how to fight the fights, what fights to fight and how to fight them in terms of making sure that students get what they need. So this could be for students within any particular subgroup, like whether that's African Americans, African American boys, students with IEPs, students with low SES, any of those things, knowing like how these fights exist, whether they exist, and how to actually contribute in that way is something that automatically comes up for me. Knowing who the decision makers and power holders are within our education systems are very important so that you can plan where you actually want to be. When I reflect on how I started out, I was like, I just want to be a teacher and I want to be able to change things. And I still, like, I wouldn't take that back for anything. I really enjoy teaching. But I did know that as I continued to teach, I was like, I can impact what's happening in my classroom, maybe the classroom next door. But if I want to have lasting or bigger impact, I have to come out of the classroom. So getting to know what the key levers are and how to get access to them and planning accordingly is the biggest thing I would advise people to do.
So we're going to stay with you, Dr. Mustafa. Please tell us what you would like the general public to know about the teaching profession. And also, what do you think that people have right and wrong from the outside looking in?
That is a loaded question. I would say I want the general public to know that the teaching profession is one that's really complicated. It's one where we throw things out like do whatever it takes and like to get kids places and like be the light and stay strong, teacher. And we're expecting teachers to be martyrs. Like, we're expecting them to be martyrs at the expense of teaching children, and not only teaching them, but pseudo raising them and being doctor and social worker and all those things in one. So I would just like to say that teaching is a profession. They get paid they get one paycheck, even though they're expected to do multiple jobs. Teachers do have some degree of support, but often they are under supported in the large task that they have of making sure that our children are well taken care of and that they're learning. It is a very detailed and complicated profession to live in, and we need to make sure that they're supported. So this means that, like, find out who your child's teacher is. Like, find out who your family member's teacher is. Find out what makes them tick, what makes them work. Find out what things teachers in the school needs, like those things. Like, I think a lot of times we arrive at schools and we think they got it and they're doing poorly just because they're doing poorly. But actually figuring out like what's going on within the school, what's going on with that particular teacher, and then moving from there, I think would be like the biggest thing.
Dr. Ntoya, what do you think that the general public should know about the teaching profession? And also, what do people have right from the outside looking in? And what do they maybe not have so right?
Yeah, I think the teaching profession is really difficult. It's really difficult to be a classroom teacher and think about all of the different things that has to happen and things that teachers have to consider. And they say teachers make more decisions during the day than any other profession, and that's difficult. So I think we have to understand that teachers are out here and they're working hard, but most importantly that they're professionals and that they have a solid grasp on what it is they're doing. And I think teachers need as much support as everyone else needs. And when you're going and when you when you're talking to your child's teacher or you're outside looking at teachers, you know, just like if you were to go to a, you know, doctor for your teeth or for your health, or you're going to, you know, you call a engineer to come in and help you with your house, you know, like you would take advice from the professional, right? You don't go into the doctor's office and say, listen, here's what I got on Google, and it says that, you know, I don't have a cold, I really have this. Like, we don't do that. But for some reason, we feel that we can go into the classroom and we can tell classroom teachers, listen, this is what my kid needs. This is what you should be doing. You're doing it wrong, right? Like, we can go into these places, into this classroom, into the schools, and tell the educators what to do when the educators are the professionals. So I think we need to take advice from the professionals, listen to what the professionals have to say, and then take their diagnosis to our kids, right? So if my kid has a cold and the doctor says, don't give your kid liquids after 8 o'clock, I'm not going to tell him, no, that's wrong. No, I'm going to go home and say, listen, you can't have liquids after 8 o'clock because the doctor said. So I think it's important to look at teachers as that same type of professional and really look to form a relationship with the classroom teacher, with the administrator at the school, because that relationship is really what's going to help your child.
So hopefully people will walk away from this feeling like our higher education professionals or our education professionals are equipped and ready to educate our children and also to take their word for things. I think what you're saying, what you both said, is that it should be a bit more of a conversation, right? Instead of doing your own, maybe a parent or a family member doing their own research and telling teachers, like, this is what needs to happen. If you suspect something needs to happen, maybe just ask the teacher, right? Okay, this next question is for Dr. Mustafa. Can you tell us what culturally relevant pedagogy is, and also how did you use it in your teaching and how do you use it in your work right now?
So culturally relevant pedagogy is it's a theoretical model that addresses, like, initially was developed to address student achievements, particularly for African American students. It talks about how students need their culture affirmed, accepted, that we need to bring in discussion of who our students are in addition to teaching them about dominant culture in society. It essentially, like, values our children, and it uses education as a way to empower them to learn what you're asking them to learn, as well as make necessary changes within their community to make progress forward. I mean, I know that's a lot, but that's essentially what it is. So, like, it's working collectively to make sure that cultures are affirmed and that we're not just pushing, like, this top-down model of dominant culture, but also thinking about the people and the community that we sit in and how and what value they bring to the things that we're learning and teaching today. I use this in my teaching to, one, reach my students. I needed to know who they are, where they came from, what things are important and value to them in order to reach them. In order to teach you, I must know you. So I got to do that. I also used it to make connections to the community. So there were some times where I brought in family members or brought in community members to do some teaching or have some conversations or participate in developing programs to share with the community and with the school to really make sure that we were working together. So it's community and school and culture, and the cultures represented working together as opposed to just pushing whatever the school decided. Within my work now, I would say it's much of the same. Instead of teaching students, now it is my job to really help teachers think deeply about who is in their classroom, what's of value, what's top of mind for them, and how we can integrate that into the classroom, and how I can support them in that as well.
Yeah, us taking notes over here. In order to teach you, I must know you. I type that down quick. I think that's really important. I think that's really, really important. And I think that that's something that can be used beyond the classroom. I'm always looking about, my own teaching experience in the classroom and how I use that, even in my nonprofit work today. So I think that that's really important for people to understand, is that you always need to make sure you understand or can relate to the people that you're serving. The next question that we have is for Dr. Ntoya. We'll also ask this to Dr. Mustafa, but first, Dr. Ntoya, tell us about a principal you worked with when you were teaching that helped you learn to be a teacher. What did you learn from them? How did they structure things so that you were able to grow as a teacher?
Did you say a person or a principal?
It could be a principal. The question is phrased as a principal that supported you, but it could be an administrator of any type, or it could be a peer teacher as well. But someone that was able to help you grow as a teacher. Tell us what you learned from them.
Yeah, so I got to give a big shout out to, she was my first administrator. It was Terry Whittington. Terry Whittington was her name when she was with me. And actually it was Terry Muse when she was with me. She was, and she was African-American woman. I really appreciated like her presence in the classroom, and she was always really calm, and she was always very supportive. And I remember I remember I was in my first year of teaching, and I was just like all of us first year teachers. I was a hot mess. And she came in and she was like, it's okay. It's okay. Let's just calm down. Let's videotape your classroom. I'm like, videotape my classroom? What am I going to videotape the classroom? So we did it, and we were able to sit down and look at what happened and look at the different things in the classroom, and look at how to really relate to all of my students. And she was really that calm voice for me, because when I first started teaching, I felt like the day was like a time bomb. Like as soon as 8 o'clock hit, it was like someone pulled a clip, and I was just going until 2:30 when the bell rang, and then I was able to calm down. But she actually helped me kind of structure my classroom. She helped me bring some calm to my presence in the classroom, and she was very influential in the way I approached teaching.
And Dr. Mustafa, tell us about who that person may have been for you as well.
I would say that first person for me was actually a teacher. I was doing student teaching, and I was at a preschool for my first student teaching experience. And I went in there and I was like, oh, I love kids and it's everything. And I literally was like, whatever a kid needed, I would try to tend to it. And she was like, those children are going to eat you alive if you try to meet each individual need and stop to do every single thing. And her advice was really set up expectations for them, like love them, hug them, care for them when they need, like show them grace, mercy, all of that other good stuff. But make sure you also set up high expectations. So she was the first one, and I always think back to that even as I went down like many years of teaching. And I also thought about like how that can play into like empowering children and things like that, which is what I'm really big on. My next one was a principal, maybe a couple principals back, maybe 3 principals back at this time. And the way that this principal structured things to help me grow was really by like having conversations that allowed me to reflect on what I was doing as a teacher, where I wanted to go, the things that I would hope to see in my students. And then as he listened and said, oh, okay, like this sounds good. How do you plan on doing that? So like actually thinking about things like that, and then also making suggestions, providing opportunities for professional development or to work with and see teachers who were in the place where I wanted to be. So actually crafting experiences and trainings or setting those things up so that I can experience the growth that I wanted to have.
Amazing. We're going to stick with you for a second, Dr. Mustafa. You talked about transition a little bit, being at different schools. So this is a 2-part question. The first part is just to describe your transition from the classroom to your current role. But also, could you talk a little bit about the transition that people might go through transferring from school to school? and what that might be like as well.
Okay. I will focus on the school to school first, and then I'll follow up with the from classroom to outside of the classroom. So from school to school, that transition can be challenging. It's always hard to find a new position, no matter what you're going into. But as a teacher, I found that I changed schools quite often because I was looking for something that was a good fit for me and that was representative of the work that I really wanted to do. So I always went into applications and in schools like that intentionally. So when I went into interview, they were asking me questions, but I was walking around the school and making note of what I saw as well. Like, were kids being respected? Were there families on this campus? Were families welcomed on this campus? What resources did they have available for students, etc.? So I'm looking for those things as I walked into the door. If I didn't see them, that meant maybe I stick in my current school where things aren't quite right for a little bit, or I look at another school and hope that I find something that is right. So I would say, like, as you transition from school to school, it's important to look for things that you want to see. Like, if you see a teacher or you see practices that you would like to put in play, those are things to ask about, or those are things to consider a specific school for. Always talk to the person in the role that you are pursuing. So I would go in and I would say, can I speak to a teacher if I was looking to be a teacher there? So what is advertised is what is ideal. The teacher's experience is what is real. So knowing to ask like those questions to make sure that you are getting into some space or place that is going to care about not only how well you teach, but how well you take care of yourself is something that I would strongly suggest. And then transition from the classroom to my current role, I would say this one was one that was, this transition was challenging as well, but for different reasons. I would say just looking into, like, still the same kind of looking or exercising or seeking some discernment around, like, whether or not you want to get into a school and why. How paying attention to adult relationships was really important. It's important for both, but considering that you won't be you and your students, maybe you can close your door and get away from some things. Really thinking about, like, who is the person that's your direct supervisor? Who is your team of people? Do these seem like a group of people that are competent, that you can trust, that you can grow with? That sort of thing was really important. Opportunities for mentorship is really important. Like, make sure that you aren't going to come in as the most experienced person in the room as a new person, but you need someone who can help you grow past what you're already able to do is really important. And I would say the location is also important. So, like, as you lead somewhere, make sure you feel a connection to the community that you're serving, or get to know a little bit about the community you're walking into, so that you can serve them well. If you don't know anything about the community and don't care to know about what's going on in that community, you probably shouldn't be working in it. So I would say make sure that you take care to do those things.
I'm doing the snap of my fingers. Whew. Got gems here. Dr. Ntoya, can you share a little bit about your transition as well? What are some things that you learned in transitioning into consulting? And where do you see yourself transitioning into in the next thing?
Yeah, and I just want to piggyback everything that Dr. Mustafa said, and I was just cracking up at Dr. Thomas as she was snapping her fingers. That was great. So yeah, just piggyback off of that. And one of the things with transitioning to being a consultant is to think about, like what Dr. Mustafa said, what population do you want to serve, and kind of where's your expertise? Finding your niche, finding the thing that you really enjoy. Because there's so many things. You can go into curriculum, you can go into curriculum design, curriculum implementation, you can go into policy, you can go into, teacher leadership, coaching, right? There's so many different things, but find that thing that you really enjoy and that you're really good at. And that's, for me, when I picked my dissertation topic, this one stuck out because I knew that I did the S in STEM, but it was interesting to me what the rest of that integration could look like. And when I started talking to my chairs, my dissertation chairs, they talked to me about the space being kind of wide open. There's no real definition of what STEM is. So I was able to walk into that space and help schools with determine what STEM looks like and what STEAM looks like at their schools. So I think it's important that you know what your lane is. You understand what it is you enjoy doing, and then finding where the challenges are with the schools and how you can help schools with determining how they're going to go about addressing those challenges.
So final question, and we're going to stay with you, Dr. Ntoya. What are the trends you're noticing in terms of things teachers need support with, and how do you provide that support?
Yeah, one of the biggest thing, and I've talked about this, I think, for in this space, but it's that ed tech space. Like, what does ed tech look like in our classes? Because there's so much technology out there. There's so many things that educators are doing. I think teachers need to dive in and get a sense for what that looks like, especially if you're a veteran teacher and you've been teaching for a while. There are all these new platforms coming out, all these new technologies, these new ways that our students are interacting with the world, that we need to take those things and put them in our classes. So instead of like being mad at students for using cell phones, how do we use cell phones as an instructional tool? If you're doing a one-to-one device, if we're concerned with students like going on YouTube watching videos, well, how do we get them to engage more in the content using technology? So they're using the technology in a very real, authentic way. So I think and you think of things like artificial intelligence, you think of things like 3D printing and cloud computing, how these things are moving in real life, and how do we get those things moving in real life into our classrooms, right? Having our classroom be kind of on par with what's happening in our society. So just keep staying relevant, and I think using technology is the way you do it.
I really like that. I think that in addition to cultural relevant pedagogy, I think making sure that we're on par with or keeping up with and teaching what's happening socially, right? Whether that's technology, health, or whatever it may be, just relevant, timely teaching on these topics is a great way to go and probably keep students' attention, right, in the classroom. So same question, Dr. Mustafa. I'm wondering what you are thinking in terms of the current teacher trends, and also how you're providing that support to them.
So similar to what Dr. Ntoya and Dr. Thomas just shared about making sure that things are relevant, that is a big thing. And just adding to that, I would say there's a growing shortage of teachers and a growing number of teachers who are just not actually staying in teaching. So not only are people not applying to be teachers or not going to school to be teachers, they're not staying in it. And I would say that I suspect that part of it is just the large task that teaching is. And then also like the lack of preparedness or the kind of warped mindset that people may be entering the field with. I think about teachers needing to see live examples of what good and quality teaching is, what relevant teaching is, what timely teaching is, what teaching should look like today, integrating things like social media, technology, etc., is for students. Is really important, and it's not something that we're necessarily preparing teachers to do. Like, we are very much still teaching teachers to be traditional, and I put that in quotes, traditional teachers to teach traditional students, and those things no longer exist. So when we do that, teachers come into the field and they are shocked that kids don't want to sit in rows and that they want to be on the computer and that they want to touch and talk about and delve deep into things by using their cell phones, computers, social media, etc. So I think that we really need to teach teachers what is relevant for students. Student teaching is a very good tool, and I think that some programs offer teachers the opportunity to become teachers without ever having been inside of a classroom, and I think that is a huge disservice. And then also I think that feeling a purpose and connection that runs deeper than these kids need me or I just want to help is necessary, right? Like these kids need me. Like when these kids are getting on your last nerve is not going to take you very far. Actually like feeling a sense of purpose that's deeper than that, and also being willing to be open to learn from the kids that you teach. Or if you're going into higher education, learning from the adults that you teach. You, as a teacher, don't come in as the sole holder of knowledge. To disperse it to those who sit in front of you is something that you have to collaboratively build together. And it's something that not all teachers are going into the field knowing, which makes it feel like you are climbing up, I guess, like an impossible wall, right? Or like taking on this impossible task. So really going in with a sense of like, I'm a facilitator of learning experiences. Like as much as I teach, I can also learn from the people who teach me. And I say this as a person who started off and still have a heart for students who are like 3 years old and older, right? And I can still learn from them. So there's no age limit to this. There's no age limit to this. Like you can learn whether your kids are 3 or your students are 3 or 83. You have to go into it with that. And in terms of like support, I would say like crucial and critical conversations are necessary to make sure that we're calling people out on things like bias, that we're calling people out on the I think I know it all, calling people out on saying, well, these kids or this community just like things like that. We need to stop in order to make sure that we move forward and teach the people who are in our classrooms well.
Thank you for that. Yes, we need to do all of those things. I see Dr. Files also snapping. Dr. Mustafa and Dr. Ntoya, is there anything else that you would like to tell us, or are there any questions we didn't ask that you think are important for us to talk about today before we close?
Yeah, I think this conversation Dr. Mustafa talked about is, like the achievement gap for African American students specifically is really important, and districts all over the country are trying to figure out how to reach our students. And I think it's important that we talk about cultural relevancy and we talk about what that really means. And it's not, and I love how you said that, Dr. Mustafa, it's not just, hey, I've got a bunch of books that have African American characters in it, or it's more than that, it's deeper than that. And there's really work that the educator has to do to understand where the student is coming from. And if you don't understand that, then that becomes a barrier between you and the student, and it interrupts the learning process. So I think it's really important that we have this conversation about cultural relevancy. How does your pedagogy respond to that? And how do we make what we're teaching relevant to our kids? What they're interested in, how that relates to the content, and that pulls them in.
Yes, we have to make things relevant. So if we're going to teach about Europe, we need to teach about Africa and Asia and everywhere else, right? Thank you for saying that.
I just wanted to add, I definitely agree. We need to make sure that we are meeting the needs of our students. We definitely need to talk about what is relevant. We need to make sure that we are considering who's in there, what they're doing. And I also wanted to add that not only do we need to recognize the the habits of, the cultures of what's valued within the communities, but we also, as teachers, as educators, need to do the work of sustaining the cultures that are represented in our classrooms. So culturally relevant pedagogy was like the jumping or start point. And this work continues with researchers like Paris and Alim, who wrote about culturally sustaining pedagogy. So like if it's in your culture that you speak, that you work together, that you collaborate, that you build, that you contribute to something, that you represent like the power that your ancestors gave you, etc. We need to figure out how we can foster those things in our classrooms, and make sure that we affirm students and who they are in their cultures, as opposed to going along with the status quo where if it's not, like if our students don't look like dominant culture, if they don't act like what's represented in dominant culture, then they're not right and they're the problem. And we need to stop things like that and instead encourage and facilitate spaces where students can be fully who they are, and that we can just still nurture their ability to be good learners, be good teachers, and then also be changers of society. Like the whole purpose of culturally relevant pedagogy and culturally sustaining pedagogy is that we are building up new generations of students, of people, etc., who are going to make things more just for the generations that come after them.
I'm going to jump in right now and speak directly to whoever's watching this right now. This is the best professional development you're going to get this week. So if you don't share this with someone that you know that's in the classroom, thinking about being in the classroom, is leading a school, they need to be watching this right now. So be sure to take this moment to share this with the ones that are sharing the knowledge with the next generation. I really appreciate both of you sharing your perspectives here today. And I'm going to pass it back to Dr. Thomas to close us out for today.
Agreed. Definitely share this. I'm going to go ahead and close and let you know where you can access this. This has been another episode of our Smart Digital Workshop series. I want to thank you, Drs. Mustafa and Ntoya, for your participation today. This episode is going to be edited and shared across multiple social media platforms, including Facebook, Twitter, Dr. Ntoya, LinkedIn, as well as SoundCloud. As participants, you will receive the first notice of its availability, and that is a wrap. Thanks so much.